how do we best work?
He's doing it again.
How do we,
Cornwall gets 3 hotels.
well, look, Woodbury's going to have 6, and,
Yeah.
I mean, I'll own it. I mean, look, if we don't end up having another pool and we rip that out of the ground, that's on me. I'm going to own it. I got the public feedback. I did that. We're going to move on. Cornwall's willing to do projects where we work together to find an optimal, outcome. And I think that that's the best way to work with Cornwall. You got to work with us. We'll work with you. Let's come up with a good project. We could do it together.
I think there are folks who would say, well, I don't want my money, I don't want taxpayer money or my money going towards private projects.
Yeah.
That's not what tax money should be done. What would be your thoughts on that?
Just like when people are like, well, I don't want to be Beacon. Well, look, we're not Beacon. We don't have a train station, and we're not going to be Beacon. Our main street's not that big. We're Cornwall, and we're going to be our version of what we're going to be. Everyone's recognized what they did wrong, and I think we're now trying to make this right and make it a win for Cornwall. And I think if we all work together, we'll make it a win.
That's the biggest thing. Right?
I don't have
That's
$7 or
always
$8.
the biggest thing.
I don't have $7 or $8 million sitting in a fund balance. We're not Newburgh. We didn't get enough money for
Mr. Sabbatical over here, Mike.
So you had mentioned, a lot of the projects that you're talking about were public projects.
Yeah.
But the hotel specifically a private project.
Yeah.
I think there are folks who would say, well, I don't want my money, I don't want taxpayer money or my money going towards private projects.
Yeah.
That's not what tax money should be done. What would be your thoughts on that?
So my response to that would be, well, first, if it doesn't come to Cornwall, it's going to Newburgh, it's going to Poughkeepsie, it's going to Middletown, it's going somewhere else. We're not going to stop the state's policy of having economic development programs. And look, let's be honest, there are some good economic development programs and there are some bad ones. But most people agree that Restore New York is one of the better ones because, one, you take blighted properties and disgusting looking properties like that over there that are currently generating less than $15,000 a year in taxes, and you invest in them, you clean them up, so that when this hotel is built, you're going to have 35 plus jobs. You're going to have between sales tax, hotel tax, local, county, school district tax. I mean, we're going to get, close to $500,000 in overall taxes going from it basically being a blighted eyesore for decades. And I would say that is worth it in my mind in terms of, now look, should we be giving, Amazon lots of money to come here when we know they have to come here anyway? I would say no, probably not. And I think you got to have a distinction, right? Are you going to give money to mega, there has to be a good reason to do it. I would say this is a good reason because this is going to unlock our main street. This is going to really help, all the small businesses. It's not just going to be to benefit one big company, one big corporation. This is going to be someone that, a property owner that I think has actually, worked up, started a business, became successful, wants to give back. I mean, he was honored by the hospital, I believe, last year. He's a good person. And I think that, those are the type of people that I think we shouldn't mind helping out, especially if they're helping their community out.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of how I would look at it.
You brought up Amazon and warehouses. There's warehouses going up all over the county. You've got Montgomery and mega warehouses.
Yeah.
Where do you see that with regards to Cornwall, and is that something that you think we should be looking at bringing those to our area?
So I would say we kind of had the perfect test here. When we had the last comp plan that was adopted in 2019 opened the door to the treetop debacle that came in that the public overwhelmingly rejected. And I think we learned a lot about that. I'm not saying no to warehouses. I'm saying that if we're going to do them, we already have places in town where there's warehouses. Look at Route 32. Look at where Cat's Gluten-Free Bakery is. That whole warehouse complex out there that's all the way back from the road, just on the back of the thruway. You don't really even know it's there unless you go back there. And there's, Mill Street. That's an old industrial. That's an old industrial place.
I didn't know it was there.
And there's some other spots, right? So we have existing areas that have been there for years. let's not cut down forests to build warehouses when we have existing areas that are, in some cases, brownfields. And there's actually, the county's doing a brownfield study right now to find areas that can be cleaned up and that can be, turned into those things. Let's focus on that in those areas, right? So I think as far as like warehousing in Cornwall, though, what we learned is like, if they're not in the right places, the treetop proposal, you were going to have all these tractor trailer trips coming up Quaker, turning on the NW, going on Angola, going on Willow, like just like all over the place. And I think that no one really signed up for that. And I think that that really should have been considered before they, made that proposal. And really before in the comp plan, we kind of zoned these properties. Like we really should have given a better, and I wasn't on the board at the time. I didn't get a vote. I didn't have anything. This was all done in 2019 as far as like developing that. And
it feels like just yesterday, though.
I know it was like what, 6 years ago, and I feel like we really should have thought that through. But we've done that now. We had a public hearing. We went through 2 years. We really looked at it, and I mean, I have not had a single person that's come up to me that said, "Man, I'm really disappointed that they're not going forward with this." I have not had a single person, right? Mm-hmm. But look, there are other places in the county that, look, Montgomery has done it. Wojehowski currently has a bunch that are proposed. I think that's where that 3.5 square million Amazon warehouse is going to be if it gets.
Well, they have that direct.
They
access,
have better.
right?
They
direct
have better
access
access.
to 84.
They have better
87
access
than we have. So
yes,
right.
We're the wrong. And you also got to think about too. We were the birthplace of the modern environmental movement. We had the Storm King decision that established the right of municipalities and individuals to sue to preserve scenic beauty in the environment, and like. That was back in 1965. That's what led to the creation of Scenic Hudson. So we already have this. So you're coming into this community that's already like, like environment on steroids, and you're going to propose this warehouse. Well, what do you think's going to happen? Like literally everyone who lives here, whether you're Republican, conservative, Democrat, we have this in our veins that we want to preserve what it's like here. And like we all love the environment here in Cornwall, so of course it was going to be an uphill battle. For sure. And so I guess the one thing that I would say that to developers out there, it is always better to be working with the municipality and the community than to be trying to come in and like jam something through. That almost never works.
And what safeguards are being put in place to make sure that we don't have that situation in the future?
So what I would say is that one of the things, well, first and foremost, we got to look at the comp plan. So
can you talk a little bit about the comp plan? Because you talk about the comp plan.
People are like, what's a comp plan?
Yeah, what's a comp
plan?
plan?
Well, there's that link out right now to do that, right?
Yeah. What's a comp plan?
Wait, hold on. Maybe we should put that link right now to where people could go and
take the survey.
Take the survey,
right? Take the survey,
right.
yeah.
Oscar, can we do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, Oscar says yes.
So, okay, so before I talk about the comp plan, because that's the recent thing, after we had the golf course debacle where all those trees got cut down and all of that stuff, one of the things we realized is that we need to have a tree preservation plan where, let's say someone's going to come in and wants to clear cut a property. Look, that's fine if you've got to cut down trees for your development, but like we want to know about it, and we want to make sure that if you're going to do that, well, one, you're not going to like make it worse for like the people that live downstream of that. Like think like the golf course neighborhood over there.
Right.
We want to make sure that those trees are going to be replaced somewhere else in the community. Because one of the things about Cornwall, one of the things that makes us special is all of this this canopy cover that we have, the trees. It makes us like a special, like a special place to live. And it's also important for climate change, the environment, etc. So we put a tree preservation law into place. And that's been really, like a really good thing. We also put in place enhanced stormwater regulations. So one of the things that whenever you're building, you have to design how the stormwater comes on your site, how it gets stored, how it leaves the site, so it doesn't like put muddy brown water into the surrounding neighborhoods, into streams, into roadways. And so we had the very, very basic minimum DEC regulations, and we upped them up a little bit to account for the intense rainfalls that we're getting. So if you're going to build the property, you can't just build at the minimum level, which would allow, let's say you get 6 inches of rain. Well, it's going to be a disaster downstream, right? we, raised it a little bit higher. We wanted to balance, like, you can make your project work and you can't make your project work. 'Cause you got to be conscious. You can't make it so that people can never build, but you also don't want to make it so that their project is going to destroy a surrounding neighborhood. So we put the enhanced stormwater regulations in, and so now when you're building these bigger projects, you have to make sure that you're going to account for these hyper-localized extreme weather events and all the additional rainfall that we're getting. Because we are. I mean, we just got 4.5 inches the other day, and if we had gotten a couple more inches, I mean, we would have had like a repeat of the July 9th.
Right.
And so we always have to be conscious because we're getting these storms like every 6 months, And so anyway, now onto the comp plan. Basically, a comprehensive plan, you do it every 5 to 10 years, and it basically forms like it helps. You have a vision statement, and you say, look, we want to be an environmentally friendly, focus on scenic beauty, small town charm with, X, Y, and Z. And then you take the vision and you translate it into, this is the type of housing we want to allow, and this is the type of development, and this is like the recreational, cultural, whatever. And then it talks about zoning. How is the zoning going to match, these other categories? And so, for instance, like on like the warehousing front, you really want to look at what are the areas in town, what are the size and intensity of the warehousing, should they be accessory uses, right? Obviously, if you have like a factory manufacturing, you need a place to store the stuff, but like that's an accessory use, right? That's not an Amazon warehouse. So you really got to think about in your town, do you want to leave it so open, the zoning, that anyone can just come in and propose like a megala warehouse on this property next to a residential neighborhood? And I think Cornwall would say no. At least that's Cornwall. Look, other towns are going to do what they want because they have different, like they're better suited for it. But it's really taking a look at these things to say, what do you want to have happen where? And of course, you also have to balance this with like private property rights and like what are people allowed to do on their properties, because you don't want to get into a situation where you make it so hard for someone to build anything on their property that they can't build. Then you're going to end up in federal court. So you really have to like balance things.
Wait, I got a couple of bushes that need to come down in my house. Am I okay with that? Or
so
is there going to be some kind of rules there? Can I just...
So when we were going through the tree preservation law, we had, there was people that were asking questions about,
it's a big one though.
Are you going to tell me like that I can't rip out my old Rose of Sharon bushes?
I was joking.
We had people ask that question. We were like, shrubs and bushes like Rose of Sharon do not count towards this.
Yeah, I just got a quote. I just got a quote to take them out.
You did, yeah. You can take them out. You don't need to. You don't need to go Gary and get a tree plot map to take your Rose of Sharons out.
So people that want to have input into the comprehensive plan, what is it that you and your team are doing to make sure that the residents and the community considerations are being
check the link down here.
So yes, sorry.
We're going to work that in.
We have a survey, and we are now over 600 responses on our survey. That was as of, I believe, Monday. So we've been getting feedback on a survey. We were at Riverfest, and we've been getting feedback. The Economic Development Advisory Committee, they were getting feedback. We got a lot. And guess what number one was? Preservation, parks, scenic beauty. That's almost always the number one thing on all of these things that we get. So we know. That's how I know. I mean, not one person put down, I want warehouses. Right. So I think we know, I know I keep coming back to that, but like... I
didn't fill mine out yet.
I think we really...
I wouldn't say that, by the way.
I think
it's just a joke.
Like, we're really starting to learn what we want to be, and obviously, but that gets to another thing is like, how do you balance, we already have 36% of our properties off the tax roll preserved. So we're getting to this critical point where I think it's more like, how do we preserve what we have? Let's not lose any more. I don't know how much more we can take off because we got to pay for things too. We got to pay for services. And so I think the public has to realize there's going to have to be a balance of, we need hotels. I mean, I'm looking to have, I guess what I would call the least intensive type of economy possible here, where we're going to focus on development where we already have it. So like if there's warehouses on Route 32 out, over by Cat's Gluten Free, fine. put that stuff out there on that property where it's contained. It's already a brownfield. That's where it should go. On Main Street, we want to maximize. Look, we've got this hotel. So, is there another, like another place in town where a hotel could go, right? How do we best work?
He's doing it again.
How do we,
Cornwall gets 3 hotels.
Well, look, Woodbury's going to have 6, and I mean, we're not Woodbury, and so just like when people are like, "Well, I don't want to be Beacon." Well, look, we're not Beacon. We don't have a train station, and we're not going to be Beacon. Our Main Street's not that big. We're Cornwall, and we're going to be our version of what we're going to be.
Disclaimer: there's no more hotels coming that we know of.
No,
just
there
to
no
be
more,
clear, I don't want your email to be flooded right now.
No,
because that's what's going to happen.
No, there are no more hotels.
No, there are no more hotels coming.
But again.
But I think what you're saying is, I mean, with our Main Street, there's opportunity, right? Like we have a foundation, right? It's about how do you maximize that foundation to satisfy the needs of the community, right?
Yeah.
So whether that be housing, whether that be retail, whether that be restaurants or bars, we have those locations, and it's about maximizing that and putting those things in place.
Yeah, and one of the things I would say too, and this is, I mean, look, some people have been like, well, look, why is Josh taking an active role in trying to figure out what to do with NEMA or the Cornwall Commons property? And I would say, it's better to work with property owners and people that want to to develop them than it is to just sit back and be like, oh, I hope a good project comes in, because it's a lot easier to sort of direct it from the beginning than it is to have to fight it when it's, going before a legal process. It's much easier to go out and say, look, what do we think this should be? Work with the property owner. What do you want to bring here? How do we make this work? Let's work together. Versus getting into adversarial relationships. Because I think it's always better to work with people, to partner with them, than it is to fight them. And look, sometimes you got to fight, but I always think it's better to work together, to try to
Me and Scott are doing it. We don't like each other. And here we are. I mean, it's crazy, but we still make it work.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, what I always say is like, hey, change is going to happen, right? Like, regardless, that's the one true thing that is going to happen, right? Death, taxes, and change.
Don't be so dark. Okay. All right.
And so
we know this. Okay.
So you can either choose the change that you want, right? Or have the change thrust upon you. And so I think I think that makes a lot of sense. Is like, let's work together.
I have a saying, by the way.
Yeah. What's your saying?
Contribute more than you criticize.
Absolutely.
Come on, you like that?
Yeah, I love it. We'd like to take this opportunity to thank our Emerald sponsor, Walden Savings Bank. They're the only bank in town here in Cornwall. And if you're looking for whether it's a personal bank, a business bank, having a bank in town where you can walk right in, speak with a live person, super important. So check out and support your local bank. Walden Savings Bank's sponsorship allows the Chamber of Commerce to bring the podcast like this to you, as well as other events and activities to enhance the community and the business environment. So to that point, right? So having change thrust upon us, I think a good example of that is Treetop, right?
Yeah.
And so that development is squashed. However, that land is there, and something's going to happen. Like, the owners of that property aren't just going to donate it to the town, right? No. Something's going to happen there. So could you talk a little bit about that process and engaging with those developers and what's the next step there?
Sure. So what I would say is that almost immediately after, the public hearing, we waited a little bit, but, we then went back to Treetop and we were like, look, what's going to happen here? And they kind of gave the indications that they didn't want to be in a community that didn't want them. And I you know what? I give them a lot of credit, because sometimes developers will be like, well, F you, we're going to keep going through this process, right? And so they have backed off. They're giving, the town time to work with the property owners to find what I would call is a project that can work for everybody, hopefully. And so, we started engaging with the Amato family last year, let's say last June. We started talking to them like, hey, we know this didn't work out. We know that the Cornwall Commons, project didn't work out for 20 years or so, for whatever reasons, right? That's, the past is past. Let's, you got new leadership, you have a new town board, you have new, family members working on this. Let's work on this. Let's see if we can make it go with it. And so we did that. And one of the things that they wanted to see is we want to know that the public will support whatever it is that we're going to do, because we don't want to present a project that the public is going to like fight tooth and nail. And I think everyone's recognized that in Cornwall, you need the public to back what you're doing. I just think like that. If you ask anyone across the county now, one, they're going to say that it's tough to like, do projects here, which, I am trying to change that, because I do think it should be Cornwall's willing to do projects that where we work together to find an optimal, outcome. And I think that like that's the best way to work with Cornwall. You got to work with us. We'll work with you. Let's come up with a good project. We could do it together. But as far as, the Amatos, they wanted us to basically go to the public and, start a conversation. What is it you want to see here? And, and I felt the best way to do that was let's have a public hearing. Let's live stream it. Let's bring the community out. Let's engage. Let's present the old plans. Let's talk about like what went wrong, what could be possible. Let's hear from everybody. And look, we got a range. I mean, we got people that were like, look, we want, you to go ask the county for $15 million to buy it. And like the county's not doing that. Right. So let's just be, honest about that. Have a have the land preservation organizations give you the money to do that. Well, they don't, view it as like a priority preservation project. Like, they're willing to work with us on, preserving, creating some open space, a park over there. But there is no desire by, by that community to preserve the 250 acres. So right. I think we just have to be real about that. Something's going to go there. We have to make it, what's going to be best. We got to preserve as much green space as possible. We have to make sure that we protect the neighborhoods that are surrounding, because we know that they didn't like having a warehouse 50 feet through the woods.
Right.
So we know what we got to do, and we got a good amount of feedback. And I mean, overall, I think the public is open to considering, either a scaled back, sort of revisioning of Cornwall Commons, or, something similar to Eastdale. If you haven't checked out
right.
Eastdale,
that's what I was going to ask.
Go check out Eastdale. I do think that might be something we could do on a portion of the property.
Which has Rossi's in it, by the way.
Yeah.
We haven't really talked about, like, some of the best.
It would be great if Rossi's could open up a third location.
Right.
Right. Although some of our, Leos and Primas and some of the others may not like that so much. But, I always think there's room enough for everyone here.
Agreed. Agreed.
And so, look, I think we're going to see where
Eastdale located in Poughkeepsie, by the way. It's there's commercial spaces on the bottom, and it's like a little mini community.
Yeah, it's a mixed use,
apartments over,
commercial, retail, restaurants,
and I think that's maybe part of the property. And I
think
it
the same developer? Am I allowed to ask that question? I did anyway. Is it the same? It's not the same developer.
No, different
I think
developer.
what we're talking about here is just
it's the style.
Ideas.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and so this, like right now, we're in this. I would say that like what the town right now is trying to figure out is, what's going to go on the commercial, and remember, NEMA owns part of this too. They own 35 acres, like right around the commercial part of the old Cornwall Commons development. So how do we maybe bring those two together to do something jointly on that roughly 35 to 50 acres? And then what do we do on the back 200 acres, right?
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do is figure out, how do we work with everybody to get the best, because we know it's going to be developed. Like
this is all town too? It's not a mix of town and village there?
No, it's all town.
It's all town. Yeah.
It's all town.
Okay. Yeah.
So if I'm a resident who lives over there,
Yeah.
right, and so like my anxiety is going to be piqued a bit, right, about the whole situation. Can you talk a little bit and allay some of my fears as a resident who lives over there? What would you say to me?
Well, what I would say is that look, we heard you on.
I had something to want to say to you, but it would have to be bleeped out, and it would be a whole thing. But okay.
So we heard you on the warehouse piece, right? We know we got you. We probably went too far. Rather, not probably, we did. We went too far, and
well, not you.
Yeah, but like, the previous comp plan went a little too far, and opening that up for basically all kinds of things that I think the community doesn't want. We've heard you. We're doing a comp plan. We're working with with the property owner. We're trying to figure out what's going to go there. That's that's good. As far as any of these like residential projects, we want to make sure that whatever we put there that's going to be next, to residential neighborhoods is going to fit in with what's already on the other side. And, working with them, like, look, do you want to have a buffer between the neighborhoods or do you want to have them connected? Again, I think this is one of those things where we have to, like, until we get into the planning board process, until we start having those discussions, I think it's hard to know exactly like what, if you want setbacks or greater buffers, well, then we should talk about them and we should work together, the town, the neighborhoods, and, the property owner developer on doing what's going to make sense, because I don't think anyone wants an uphill battle on this. I think people are looking, to avoid that. So I think that we can get to, and again, the property owners are from here. They went to Cornwall High School. I mean, they still own property in the town. They still spend their, they still live here. You can still see them walking their dogs in town. They don't want to be walking down the town and be seen as like pariahs. Right. Like they're not going to do, they only went the direction of Treetop because the town changed the zoning on them. The town literally took away the zoning for the housing development and made it commercial, and they had no choice. Otherwise, they were going to be stuck with a piece of property that they couldn't develop and paying taxes on it. Right. So I think we have to be like, again, the town, plays a role too in what happened here. And I think that we've everyone's recognized what they did wrong. And I think we're now trying to like make this right and make it a win for Cornwall. And I think if we all work together, we'll make it a win.
Awesome.
So to wrap things up here, Josh, I really appreciate you been really generous with your time. But to wrap things up here, what do you see kind of moving forward in the next 5-10 years for Cornwall?
Yeah, and I'd actually just add on to that of, we asked you what your greatest accomplishment was. What do you feel like you still like? What do you still want to do? So that maybe 5 to 10 years, or like what do you need to do? Because and by the way, you didn't talk about term limits either, but you did that, and I really like that. I'm just throwing that out there.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Term limits were great. So I'll shut up.
Okay, so what do I still have to do here? So look, what I would say is that we have lots of infrastructure projects to do. I mean, right now I'm in the middle of this, Hasbrook drainage project, which, oh my God, let me tell you, anytime you do stuff where you're digging up the ground and you're moving pipes and you're installing things, like, look, it's like the best laid plan. What do they say? It's like the best laid, plans don't survive like the first,
Scott's the smart one.
Combat or whatever, because like everything you have to like adapt, right? So it's like, and not to compare like drainage to combat, because obviously it's not the same thing. But like as soon as you start doing anything, digging up the ground and start actually doing stuff, you're like, oh wait, this is not where it's supposed to be. Is it another like 5 feet lower? Is it like 10 feet over here? Like, do we have to change this? Do we have to change that? And so I just think like that's one of the things that I have like realized over the past couple of years, whether it's like the drainage project, whether it's like, all of these sewer projects that we're doing, whether it's anything, is that you really have to, you have to kind of just like be prepared to kind of like, manage things, to lead, to get things done, to make tough decisions, And I think like a lot, for me, a lot of it's like infrastructure, like how do we make sure that we get all of these like sewer, district projects done? How do we get the drainage project done?
Not sexy at all.
No, not
sexy.
No.
But necessary work.
Yeah, and then obviously, look, I mean, the one thing I would really, really, really love to figure out, whether or not I'm supervisor or not, like, what are we doing with the town pool? What are we doing with Munger Cottage? We finally made, and I'll have to say, this is like I'm sure I'm going to be getting phone calls, today about the town. Oh my God, it's really hot. The pool's not open. Like, why didn't you open it? Like, you know what? It has been 80 years and it's beyond its useful life. Mm-hmm. We were going to have to put so much money into it to be able to pass like Department of Health inspection and other things that we were going to have to do.
So it's not open at all this year?
Well, the kiddie pool is, yes.
But the big
pool, yes. Okay. We made the decision that, this will finally force our hand. Let's close it. One, I mean, not that many people were using it, largely because I think it was like just a disgusting, pool at this point. Mm-hmm. It was costing us a lot of money because you still have to, just because no one shows up doesn't mean you still don't have to have the same amount of lifeguards.
Right, for sure.
You know, it's leaking, etc. So how do
That was
we?
going to be my summer job, by the way.
Oh, nice.
It was.
Lifeguard?
Yeah.
He was going to be the
Thanks a
head.
lot.
He was going to be the head lifeguard working under Phyllis.
Breaking out the
You know,
Speedo.
and
Good
don't
Lord,
wanna see
that'll
that.
keep people away. That'll keep people away. For
but that's
sure.
definitely, you know, one of the things that I want to figure out. We closed it this year so we could focus on it. Expect a survey coming out in the next 2 weeks on, you know, obviously the first question is, should we replace the existing pool? If it's a no, well, then you're done with the rest of the survey. If it's a yes, then we have a bunch of questions like, so it can help us come up with like 2 to 3 options so we can then price them out and come back to the public later this year with, all right, this is what this is going to look like. This is what it will cost to the average taxpayer. You know,
That's the biggest thing. Right?
I don't have
That's always the
$7
biggest thing.
or $8 million sitting in like a fund balance. You know, we're not Newburgh. We didn't get, you know, enough money for
Mr. Sabbatical over
Yeah.
here, Mike.
you know. So like Newburgh's pool was almost entirely paid for by public money.
Yeah.
You know, but they're a different community profile. We're never going to get that. So if we want to have a pool like that, that is, you know, taxes, right? And so, you know, I want to have that conversation with the community. And look, if they don't want it, that's fine. That's okay. But let's have the discussion and let's finally resolve it. You know, we'll do it and I'll own it. I mean, look, if we don't end up having another pool and we rip that out of the ground, that's on me. I'm going to own it. You know, I got the public feedback. I did that. You know, we're going to move on. Munger Cottage, you know, that too, you know, we're looking at as well. How do we make, we've got the new side where we're going to put some money into, you know, via grants. The old side that's really, really old, we want to rip that down or at least come up with a design that envisions ripping it down, making it bigger, expanding it a little bit for, you know, for greater use. And so those are kind of the two. Before I, you know, end my time here in Cornwall, I would at least like to have a plan. Whether it's whether it's like we're not going to have a pool or we're going to leave Munger Cottage the way it is, I would at least like to have a plan in place. And, you know, would it be great for us to have like broken ground on those projects if we decide? Yes. But those to me are like two really big items that I want to have figured out. And, you know, I think, you know, after that, it's really, you know, have we done good by the town staff? I mean, look, for many, many years, and I know people will say, well, you go into public service, or you work in government, and like, you should just like want to do this. It should be like a volunteer job. Well, you know what? Like, our municipal workforce, they work really, really hard, right? You know, police, garbage, you know, plowing, all the highway, like really everybody. And like, you know, our employees were woefully underpaid for many years because, you know, we had people in town hall that just did not believe, and we always wanted to like make sure that like we, you know, instead of investing in our workforce and making sure that we had, you know, people that could afford to serve the community and live here, we were gonna like, you know, penny pinch and basically not invest in our workforce. And you had people that, you know, it was a real shame. And so we've been trying to correct some of that.
Those guys, and I'm saying
Yeah.
guys in
Yeah.
general, right? But those folks
Yeah.
work hard. Again,
Absolutely.
garbage. It's a great point, actually. Guys out there plowing the streets when we have snow and stuff.
And when we have
It
our
just-
special events, they're
Yeah.
always
Agreed.
there.
I can't do my job without them.
Yep.
And you know what? I mean, neither can, you know, I know that Obama got into trouble when he said this, but quite frankly, like, if we don't have infrastructure and, you know, roads paved and plowed and garbage picked up and all of that stuff, you know, somebody cannot go out and build an empire if they don't have a road that can be traveled on.
Right.
You know, if the garbage is not picked up, if they don't have infrastructure, if like a bridge isn't in good working order. So we need people that are going to do that, and we need to appreciate them, and we need to at least like give them salaries that are, you know, allow them to remain in the community.
awesome.
And I think that is one of the things that I am very proud of. And I know that we have a town board right now, you know, that is also sort of keyed up to the last couple of union contracts. And actually in the next couple, you know, next week or so, we're going to be announcing that we've settled the PBA contract. And I think we've done a good job by the PBA. Again, you know, as you know, we are a very safe community, but it only happens to stay that way because of our police department. And so
Yeah.
I think that like, that's very important. That actually probably should have been one of my, other than the ambulance, I would say, the employees are probably like right up there.
So what I was going to say is if people want to reach out to you, provide feedback, or just stay up to date on what's going on, what would you suggest?
Well, okay, in terms of reaching out, I do pretty freely give out my cell number, so you can find that in like any given, posts. But I would say either, send me an email, supervisor@cornwallny.gov. You could send me a Facebook Messenger, email, text message. You could stop in. I'm there every day. This is the only thing I'm doing now. I am there full time every day. So stop in. I'm very easy to get. My wife's not going to like this, but, if I'm out like in the community, I don't mind people coming up to me,
Oh, I thought you were going to say just come by the house.
No.
Just stop by the house. No, you were not going to say that.
No.
So you've answered some
Yeah.
really tough questions today, and
Yeah.
we're going to do a post-interview right now.
Sure.
So first we'll start with a true or false.
Yeah.
Chocolate chip cookie dough is better raw. True or false?
True.
You've already that's amazing. Pepperoni or plain?
Pepperoni.
Pesto or marinara?
You know what? It actually depends on the type of pasta.
He gave me a depends.
Oh, look at that.
He gave me a depends. Josh, I'm gonna hold the gun to your head here. Pesto or marinara?
Oh, marinara, because you know what I had
what I'm talking about.
I had marinara first. Pesto
That's it.
was
It
like
just jumps right in.
It was,
your head,
it was
right?
like what I had
so
first
there
when I
you
was
go.
a kid.
Three food
Yeah.
questions
All right.
for our town supervisor. Thank you for the time today, Josh.
Thank you,
We
Josh.
really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
of course.
Appreciate it. And if you like this content, please subscribe to the Cornwall Conversations podcast.
Check us out on YouTube and
Facebook.
Instagram and Facebook and share it.
Yeah.
Share it with people.
Please share. it.
Comment.